Hi, Dr. Ray. I love your show.
Let me show you what it looks like to be a holy person, and maybe you'll want to be holy like me.
You just patted yourself on the back.
You seem like an honest guy.
But you're a psychologist. Do you have some advice?
I don't know. I'm not going to tell you what to do.
You're my second favorite Italian person.
I think you have a way of making people feel relaxed.
She needs to feel the consequences of being a jerk.
I was looking for a deeper answer.
Obviously, I'm a failure. Obviously, I'm inept.
You are awesome. Keep up the good fight, my friend.
Now, from the studios of Living Bread Radio Network in Canton, Ohio, the hometown of Mother Angelica, here's Dr. Ray.
Very nice to be with you. Appreciate it. 22 or 23 years worth now. Getting a chance to talk to you and listen to you. I learn an awful lot from you folks. There's no question about this. A lot of this material is fodder, not as in paternal, but fodder like fuel for books. And I thank you so very much. I'd like to give you credit, but I don't know your last names. So thank you for joining me here. This is Look Back Friday. Look Back Friday is an idea that percolated about 11 years ago. And maybe Andrew Kruchek, my producer man and editor of these calls, tells me it's coming on to 12 years now. I don't know. Andrew, is it 12? He's in there on the other side of the plexiglass because I am in Ann Arbor. I don't know, but it is something that I was always excited about doing because I would get frustrated because I'd have other calls and I wanted to offer a few thoughts to the caller to see what we could do that would be helpful in that short period of time, but there was so much more you could say, and obviously it's not therapy, so you're not going to be able to say all that, but there was still other thoughts that could be offered. Sometimes it's just clarification. Sometimes it would take us too far afield from the question that the caller asked or the comment that the caller made. And if I were to go in that direction, I would leave their major point. And that's what Look Back Friday's for. So we've got a number of calls up there right now. Interesting, we have a comment on a call. So I'm going to have to take those two back to back because I was told by my producer man that if you don't do the first call and then the comment will make no sense on a future show if, in fact, you just take the comment independently. So we'll get to that. I get frustrated at Mass with myself. I don't know if my mind naturally just bounces all over the place. I think it does. But at Mass, I have to keep bringing myself back to attention, to proper disposition to the Mass. I can be kneeling during the consecration prayers and notice that there's a small crack in the wall behind the priest. And I'll look at that crack and I'll say, wonder what it would take to replace that, to fix that. I think it looks a little too big for spackle. Maybe you'd have to get a professional in here to do that. And matching the paint would be tough because sometimes, when you think you've got the right paint, you go get the mixture, you bring it back. It doesn't quite match. But they could be able to do that. I don't know, Father probably notices that's there. It's reasonably significant. I know, because I had a crack like that in my garage wall, and I fixed it, but it didn't match. I remember that, because I wanted to do it. It was on a Saturday that the Cleveland Guardians, at the time they were the Indians, were in the playoffs, and I wanted to get it done before I left for Cleveland. Now, all of this took place in approximately 30 seconds. I went from noticing a crack in the back wall behind the priest at Mass to the playoffs with the Cleveland Indians. 30 seconds worth. I was gone. I didn't hear a word of the consecration. People ask us sometimes, why did you have 10 kids? And my wife, being the more devout person in our marriage, said, well, a decade of a rosary is 10, so each kid could get one Hail Mary. Well, that would work except Dad was in the mix. And I can't count the number of times that we'd be praying a family rosary. The kids kind of sit all around scattered in the living room. And it would come to me, and I'd say, Hail Mary, and my daughters were quick to pounce. The sons, no, not so much, but they were like me, but my daughters, Dad, glory be. Oh, okay, I knew that. I was just seeing if you guys were paying attention. Glory be, and then I'd pray it. Now, what is it about this? I will notice this. I will put the rosary on my phone, or I have a CD still in my car, which is a 2009, and I'll put the rosary in. And I will find myself having started, say, for example, the second decade, and when I come back to the rosary, it's Hail Mary number 9. What happened to the previous 8? I don't recall them. It's frustrating. But I take comfort in something that G.K. Chesterton said. He said, if something is worth praying, it's worth praying poorly. In other words, don't not pray because you get frustrated with your own distraction. I've often joked and said, I'll tell you what, for the rosaries I prayed in my life, I would imagine if you put together all the good Hail Marys that I prayed, I'd have about 3 good rosaries over all these years. I think what the Lord wants is for us to keep pulling ourselves back. You know, as soon as I find out that I've already made plans to go to the Cleveland Indians game with the playoffs, and then I realize that Father is saying prayers of the consecration, I pull myself back, and I focus on the prayers of the consecration. For as long as I can, anyway. And me being semi-scrupulous, I often wonder, now how much do I have to be preoccupied in my own head before it wasn't really attending Mass? I've never gotten that bad, I don't think. But at the same time, I have to keep pulling myself back. I can see a little kid in the next pew and see him and start to think how he looked like my son when my son was that age, and what we used to do when my son came to Mass with us when he was 3 years old, and I'm off again, there I go. On one hand, it's frustrating, but on the other hand, I want to tell the Lord, look, keep pulling me back. Keep pulling me back. I don't think I'm too blameworthy for my wandering mind because it's not done with intent. But the intent that I do have is to come back. Start again. And see if I can lengthen my attention span upwards of a minute and a half. And I have to watch because when we play these look-back calls in their original form, I got to make sure I pay attention to the call so that I know why I put it as a look-back call, and I know what I wanted to say when look-back time came around. So we will get to that. I pretty much paid close attention to everything I was saying during this monologue.
What's the deal with Dr. Ray? I mean, is he a psychologist or a comedian?
For over 40 years, Leader Business in Ann Arbor has delivered top-quality copiers, printers, scanners, and software solutions, all backed by expert service. Rooted in faith and integrity, they ensure your operations run smoothly with fast response times and proactive maintenance. Join the many Catholic-owned organizations that trust Leader Business. Visit leaderbusiness.com or call 734-253-2534. Leader Business. Equip, serve, support.
This program brought to you in part by Ave Maria, Florida, a big kind of small town where golf carts take you everywhere and there's always something fun around the corner. Discover championship golf, resort-style amenities, and a town center full of shopping and dining. With Ave Maria University and Ave Maria Catholic Church at its heart, it's a community full of connection and charm. More than 25 model homes are available for viewing. More information can be found at avemaria.com. That's avemaria.com.
Marcus Peter hosts Unveiling the Covenants.
What is a covenant? It's a vowed exchange of lives which results in an unbreakable family bond. Throughout Scripture, God seeks to espouse all mankind to himself in an unbreakable covenant bond. His covenantal love is a free gift, but it necessitates a response from us. We are free to accept or reject it. Let's learn what this means as we unveil the covenants.
Saturday mornings at 11 and Sunday morning at 9:30 a.m. on Ave Maria Radio.
Do you own popular index mutual funds or ETFs? If so, you're automatically own shares of companies that conflict with your moral beliefs. Ave Maria mutual funds are managed to conform to pro-life and pro-family values. Long-term investors can invest in the no-load Ave Maria mutual funds. The experienced professional portfolio managers make decisions based on investment fundamentals and pro-life values. You can learn more about Ave Maria mutual funds today at 866 Ave Maria or visit AveMariaFunds.com.
Thank you so much for joining me here on The Doctor Is In with my compadre, my companion, my producer man, Andrew Kruchek, who's very involved in putting together these edited portions. He generally eliminates my badinage, which I think is rather playful, a rather ludic introduction to the call. We go right to it in editing. So let's do it. We have a mom, anonymous from New York, who she's anxious about being a mom.
I just got married in December, and I'm due with my first baby and my husband in September. And I don't know what's happened, but I was, first we found out, we weren't expecting it because we found out less than a month after we were married, and it was a big shock. And now we're excited, but then as I've gotten later into the pregnancy, it's a very odd feeling. I don't know if any other woman has said this in counseling before, but every time the baby kicks, I get a really deep anxiety. I'm very grateful for everything, and it's not that I don't like when the baby kicks, but I get this feeling in my throat, I'm worried I'm not going to be a good mom, or I'm worried I'm not going to be able to meet my daughter's emotional needs, or I'm worried I'm not going to be able to be there for her, or that I'm not going to be emotionally available. And I just have all these concerns. It's not so much about her physical needs. It's more that I'm not going to not going to give her what she needs emotionally.
What is it about the kick that dredges up these feelings?
It's weird. It's okay. It's going to sound so bad, but it almost feels invasive. I love that she's there, and it's not that I mind it, but I just get this feeling in my throat. I just get anxious when she kicks. I wouldn't say it happens every time, but it's more than half of the time I feel that way.
Two things about the kick. One, it would seem that that's a reminder that you are soon to be a mom. And this is very real. And there is a little person within you who's waiting to come out and be a little person that you're going to raise. So I think it's the reminder. The other thing I would suggest is, okay, she can get away with kicking you now. I would hope she's not going to get away with kicking you when she's 5 or 6. But you might want to start disciplining now. If she kicks you, simply say, go to your womb. Okay, sorry. You helped me out because you said you gave me a wide open chance to say what I'm about to say when you said what you said, which is you were worried that you couldn't be the kind of mom that this little girl, I'm assuming you know the sex, so you're saying it's a little girl, would need, that you might not meet her emotional needs, you might be psychologically deficient, that seems to be the biggest concern. What if I'm not up to this?
Yeah, it's so I keep seeing these like little clips whenever I'm like browsing YouTube or social media or whatever, and I see these doctors and people that aren't necessarily they don't seem politically motivated or anything, but they kind of say, oh, if you ever feel like you're in distress when you're meeting your child's emotional needs, then your child's going to learn that they need to emotionally soothe you instead of the other way around. I've always had anxiety like my whole life, so I'm just worried.
The onslaught of the experts have messed parents up. I can't put it any more bluntly than that. My very first book was a book titled You're a Better Parent Than You Think, and it deals with how neurotic the expert types have made parents. You're going to screw up, you know that, Mom? You know, if you do it this way, don't say I didn't warn you. And all of these psychological repercussions are going to happen, and it's going to be all your fault. Sweetheart, I'm going to tell you flat out, if you can believe me, I'm going to tell you, first of all, watch out for reading all these experts. They're not helping you. They're making you neurotic. That's one. Two, somehow, some way, bazillions and bazillions, and I don't know, I think that's 10 to the 9th power, bazillions of women have raised kids long before the experts, with love, with supervision, with training, with all kinds of wonderful things that belong in the relationship. When that little one comes, you are going to be so ecstatic. You're going to think to yourself, I can't believe what God has wired into me about this little one. Right now, that little one is not totally real. But when she comes and you're holding her flat out, she's going to be very real. And she's going to climb underneath your heart. And I'm going to tell you, you do not second guess yourself. You give her the love that comes naturally. You take care of her, you feed her, you do those things. If you're a little confused, okay, you ask somebody. You ask a veteran mom. What do I do when she does this? What if she's doing this? But it's highly unlikely that anything you're going to do short of severe neglect and abuse is going to mess this kid up.
She is riddled with, in the generalized anxiety sense, what ifs. What if I'm not a good mom? What if I don't read her cues and meet her needs? What if I make bad decisions and mess up? What if I'm not suited to be a mother? All of these things. She's creating in her head scenarios that are highly unlikely to happen. But she's viewing them as though they are potentially likely to happen. And they're not. It's going to come down to her realizing that my concoctions of worries in my head have no basis in reality. I'm doing this to myself. I have no evidence or reason to believe that any of this is going to happen. She's taking something that I obviously think she wanted, was to be a mom, and she's turning it into this anxiety-filled journey, potentially, of doing something psychologically incorrect. Yes, I remember as I was taking little notes here on this call, one of my first pieces of advice was quit reading these people. They're messing you up. They're talking about, if you don't do this, this is what's going to happen to your child. What are you, God? They don't know that. So that's the first thing. Just quit reading this stuff. Now, don't quit reading mine. Mine is an antidote to that stuff. But the other thing is that as it unfolds, as she unfolds as a mom, she's going to see that her instincts and her common sense are going to kick in. And she's not flailing through this on her own. I'm sure she has relatives and friends and people who have had babies and her own mom, mother-in-law. She can go to them. She can say, what did you do when this happened? Not viewing it as automatically the way to deal with it, but as a suggestion to weigh, to put it in her hopper of options. In a way, I used to do a lot of talks geared on the durability of kids, the emotional durability of kids. And I'd say, they're not made out of emotionally spun glass. They're more steel-belted tires. They're durable. They're strong. You don't have to agonize over every single move because parenting is composed of thousands and thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of moves. And any one, unless it is severely pathological, is probably not going to have any sort of long-term effect. It is the accumulation of a lot of bad moves or a lot of neglectful moves or a lot of self-centered, foolish moves that cause the problem. When you're a loving parent and you're willing to learn as you go, the odds of you damaging your kid are really low. But we've taken those odds and we've raised them to something you have to fear. And this poor mom, I feel so bad for her because here's something that normally she should enjoy and be looking forward to, and this is going to be a wonderfully warm journey, and now it's anxiety-riddled. A little knowledge, it is said, is a dangerous thing. In a funny sort of way, because I've been a psychologist for so long, and I was a psychologist for about, 9 or 10 years before we adopted our first child. I was somewhat immune to some of the nonsense that was out there and was being pushed upon parents. As I said, it was a stimulation for my first book. It prodded me, it nudged me to write that first book because I saw what was happening to so many parents I was talking to even back then. It's only gotten worse. And so when my wife and I had our first child, there was all kinds of questions. He had some special needs. There were adoption questions. But we viewed it as, okay, we're grown-ups. We can make judgments here. And if our judgment isn't the best judgment, we'll find that out. All right, we'll correct. And that's what we did. My son had multiple surgeries the first years of his life to repair a birth defect. And during those times, he was in the hospital. We were there with him. And there were times when he was hurting and frustrated and crying, sure. And we cried with him. Okay, where's mom and his dad? We're there with him. We love him. We'll be through this. And for all of his early, if you will, trauma, he grew up to be a very level-headed, faith-filled young man. So we had a sense of, we're the parents, we're making some judgments, because parenting is a whole lot of judgments. It's not a formula-riddled journey. And that took most of the anxiety out of it. And this young lady here who sounds like, just in this brief phone call, sounds like she's well-meaning. She's very well-meaning. She wants to do what's right. If she would just realize that her love and her involvement with this child is going to carry 90% of it, she'd be fine. I hope she is. I don't know where she's at. This call was a couple months back. Maybe she's giving birth now. When we come back, we'll get a comment on that call. Nice to have you with me here on The Doctor Is In on this Look Back Friday. Our previous call was a mom with a little baby in her womb who was very, very nervous about being a young mother. She was creating an awful lot of distressing, what if I don't do this? What if I can't do that? What if I don't meet her needs? Which was really a variant of saying, what if psychologically speaking, I stunt her in some way? Parents never used to worry about that so much as they do now. And Annie from Nebraska wanted to comment on the very same show. She heard our anxious mom's words, and she wanted to comment on this. So let's hear what Annie said.
I wanted to also support your answer that you gave to her. I just wanted to give a encouraging little anecdote from my life. When I was pregnant with our daughter, I had gotten some very devastating news toward the latter part, probably the last trimester of my pregnancy with her. And I was crying every day. I was devastated and hurting and crying and lamenting and wrestling with God, and was in quite some emotional turmoil during that time. And I also worried about the effect that it would have on my child. I wasn't Catholic at the time, so I was having probably a little less control over everything than I now would have liked in hindsight. But to make a long story short, my daughter is now 25, and she is one of the most joyful, peaceful, loving, very, and in her spiritual life, she's ahead of me. She is very deep into her Catholic faith. And
Annie,
in fact,
Annie, hold on.
She's a focused missionary.
Hold on. Do you realize how much better she'd be had you not cried? Do you understand that?
I know.
You held her back. Oh, yeah, she's doing great. She's a focused missionary. She's got an IQ of 156, and she's beautiful. But, hey, you don't know. I mean, she could have been an IQ of 180 and in charge of focus. You know?
Right. Yes.
Well,
anyways,
you're going to be a wonderful look-back call because you have brought up some points that a lot of young mothers wrestle with, which is my whole demeanor during pregnancy going to affect my child, and what if this bad news comes to pass? So that's a beautiful story, Annie, and that's great. That's great.
In my first book, again, I hate to keep alluding to it, but I had a mom who talked about the same thing pretty much parallel to what Annie was talking about, which is she was worried that during her pregnancy there was some stressors in her life that upset her. And emotionally, she wasn't exactly as even-keeled as she wanted to be. And her question for me was, do you think that this is going to have some effect on my child throughout life even? And I said, well, first of all, you can't know that. You can't know that. This is the human condition, and causality is much more complex than that. You can't know that. And by the way, it turns out her son is a fine young man. But it speaks of what I call one-to-one causation. Now, I'm oversimplifying, but we tend to do this. If I have this experience, now in this case, for Annie's call here, I was distressed the last trimester of my pregnancy. Very distressed. Cried, sad. Therefore, that distress will translate into, directly now, the stunting of my daughter's emotional, psychological, perhaps even physical development. All of the factors which play into the healthy development of a child are nearly infinite. There's just so many. We can understand better pathology. You know, if mom drank herself into a stupor throughout her pregnancy, yeah, there's going to be some bad effects of that. Or if her nutrition was terrible. But the thing called emotional stability is much more vague. Much more hard to pin down. You know, how does crying because you're sad translate into how this child is going to develop? That's only God's work. He can figure that out. We can't. And as she found out, it didn't. Oh, I teased her about, well, maybe you shortchanged her and you don't realize it because you have nothing to compare it to. No, the fact of the matter is she's got this 25-year-old, sounds like, from her description, delightfully mature, spiritually filled young woman. So all of that distress that in her mind she created a what if. What if my sadness over the news that I got over potentially this child's development, which turned out to be not so, reverberates to the baby and some mysterious way is going to alter her neurological structure in ways that we can't really measure because it's going to be too subtle. There's not going to be actual brain damage, but there's going to be emotional damage. Well, what is that? Well, I don't know. I mean, well, she's 4 and she threw some fits. Do you think that's what it was? Or she's 11 and she's kind of insecure. Do you think that's what it was? We can drive ourselves crazy. I know enough as a psychologist to know how much I don't know. And maybe that's the difference between me and some of you. You conclude things that really have no basis in evidence. And I look at this and go, yeah, there's no way I could figure that one out. Some of my children had very unhealthy wombs. Very unhealthy. Neglect, drug, alcohol involvement, post-birth neglect. And for the most part, they reflect the durability of God's design. Yeah, there's some learning struggles, and there's some immaturity that kicked in throughout childhood. But they're all young adults now, and in so many ways, they're beautiful people. So even in that womb environment that they had, they've managed to develop. I'm going to talk about that a little more on the other side. Thank you for joining me here on the Doctor's Inn Look Back Friday. Continuing to comment on both our anonymous young mothers-to-be call about her anxiety over her being a good mom and wondering if this anxiety is affecting her baby right now in the womb. And Annie from Nebraska calling, piggybacking on that call and saying, in fact, the latter trimester of my pregnancy, I was given some devastating potential news about my developing baby, and I cried and cried and cried and cried, and I was so distressed. And I worried and worried and worried about how this would affect the baby and her development, and ultimately as a developing person. And I was commenting on some of the histories of my own children. My 10 children are adopted, some of you might know, and some of them had some pretty rough beginnings, no question. There was drug or alcohol exposure in the womb, which is devastating, by the way. It can be devastating. It's not automatic, but it can be. Or there was neglect in the womb, or poor nutrition, or low birth weights. And these things are definitely risk factors for how a child develops in terms of learning problems or slowness to socialize or maturity issues or conscience formation, all these things. Very subtle ways now. These aren't things you can't measure them. You can't say, oh, because this many drinks were taken in the womb, this many IQ points were lost. No, you can't do it like that. It's much more vague than that. However, even at that, my children who are now grown have matured as adults. Yes, as children, there were some bumpy spots. There's no question about that. But as adults, they seem to be re-embracing what they were taught, even though some of the decisions made as adults need to be repaired. And they're doing that. So, unless a child has had a really turbulent womb environment or an early history, like those children who are in orphanages warehoused and then adopted at age 5, 6, 7 and had all kinds of years of early neglect, and that shows up in their later development psychologically, physically, emotionally, behaviorally, then to say, well, because I was worried as a pregnant mom, or I had some stressors as a pregnant mom that affected me emotionally, what risk do I run in passing this on to my developing child and then reverberating into adulthood? Well, that's real hard to measure, and it's reasonably unlikely. And the point I'm trying to make is that even when you have legitimate, identifiable physical risks, chemical risks in that environment, even at that, some children are durable enough to not only survive it, but to go on to become reasonably functioning human beings. So that said, my youngest daughter is pregnant right now. She even brought this up reasonably, and her daddy had to confirm it for her, had to reassure her, because she said something about, well, I don't want to get too upset about things now because I'm pregnant, and I really don't want this to affect my little daughter. And I said, Lizzie, it's not going to affect your little daughter. You're taking good care of yourself. You're healthy. You're eating right. You're not taking anything in that could potentially be an identifiable toxin for the baby. The idea that you get yourself upset over something on a day-to-day basis is not going to be absorbed by the baby. And at age 4, when she becomes like you were at age 4 for us, my dear, it isn't going to be because you got upset 16 times during pregnancy. It's going to be because she is who she is. It's going to be because of your discipline skills. It's going to be because of a whole bunch of stuff that interplays together, as opposed to the fact that the roots of all this is when I spent those 2 days being upset over X. So there. Let me see if I should take a break. Yeah, I'll take a break, and then I will go to Cathy, who her father died elderly, and she is really struggling with her feelings, and you only really struggle with feelings if they're ill feelings toward his wife. When I come back.
Hi, I'm Angie. Did you know a billboard can save a baby's life? It's true. You can make a difference this holiday by helping us spread the pro-life message to reach those who are struggling with an unplanned pregnancy. Our billboards and ads feature our 800 hotline for help, which connects people to pro-life centers nationwide that can assist with free medical help, baby supplies, and more. Won't you join us in this season of giving? Please make a gift today. Visit prolifeacrossamerica.org. That's prolifeacrossamerica.org.
What are the 3 parables Jesus tells about prayer in St. Luke's Gospel? The first is what the Catechism calls the importunate friend. This is the friend who wakes a pal at midnight in order to borrow 3 loaves of bread to feed a visitor. The second parable the Catechism labels the importunate widow, who persistently pleads for her rights from a reluctant judge till the wearied judge rules in her favor. This parable illustrates the need to pray always and with the patience of faith. Jesus closes this parable with the poignant question, when the Son of Man comes, will he find any faith on the earth? The third parable centers on the Pharisee and the tax collector, commending the tax collector for his humility because he asked God to be merciful to me, a sinner, a prayer which the Church adopts as its own. This is Peggy Stanton, and this has been the Order of Malta's Minute with the Catechism.
Light of the East, weekends on Ave Maria Radio.
I am Father Thomas Loya. This week on Ave Maria, do not celebrate Christmas. That's right, do not celebrate Christmas. Rather, rely on the Church's preparation for Christmas to help you enter into the mystery of the Incarnation and be transformed by it.
Now on Ave Maria Radio's newest FM stations, 105.5 FM in Southfield and 107.9 FM in Ann Arbor.
Got time for one more look-back call. This is Cathy from Michigan, whose father passed away at age 93. Well, she's got some feelings that ain't so good toward his wife.
Cathy, I'm sorry to hear that. How old was your dad?
My dad was 93 and a half years old when he passed.
Okay.
And the last year of his life was difficult in that he couldn't do the things that he loved. And so he decided to go and wanted to be in hospice and came home. And 3 days later, he was gone. He died a beautiful death. He was an extraordinary man in many, many ways. What he did for the community, what he did for his children, what he did for the least of his brothers. He was extraordinary. And my true north, my compass, and likewise for my 4 brothers. I'll give you a little bit of what's going on in my head and try to be specific. My dad married a woman after my mom died, and he was married for 25 years, Cathy. And we loved Cathy, but Cathy can be difficult, and so we walk on eggshells around her to make things easier. Since my dad's death a week ago, I've had all of a sudden the pent-up anger, mistrust, all of these feelings seem to have come out in me, and my anger is targeted toward Cathy. Did she do enough? Did she really love him? Did she take good enough care of him? Did she? I think it's very uncharacteristic of me, and normally I pray my way through these and get relief. And in fact, after one very terrible day last week, I did get relief. I almost felt as if I was being targeted by Satan, and he was trying to worm his way in, as he does, and he was winning.
Wait a minute. So first of all, you think you were targeted by Satan, and then you call me. Don't include me in with him. All right, Cathy. Here's what I'm going to guess to what's going on in your head. You described your dad as a beautiful man, and as such, he deserves a wonderful, loving wife.
Yeah.
For a while, as he was married those 25 years, you sized it up, and you said, well, he seems to be happy. Yeah, she's difficult, and she's a problem, but he seems to know how to live with her. So now that he has passed on, you're saying, wait a minute. How much did my dad put up with? What What, did she realize what she had in my dad?
Yeah.
Or was he the one who's always serving her when she should have been given more to him? So far, am I on track here?
You are, but some of those feelings, though, I think Cathy did the best to her ability.
Okay.
She did the best to her ability. Did she do them the way I would have done them? No. She didn't know my dad as long as I did.
Here's the key. The key, hon. You're looking at this, and you have to ask, was Dad pleased and content with Cathy? No matter what he dealt with, and you said, I wouldn't deal with that, but he did. And that's what made him who he was. So in that sense, you can say, even though my assessment is that Dad didn't get everything he could have gotten out of a wife, he thinks he did. And for 25 years, she was a good companion to him in his mind. And that's how you lay it to rest.
And you pray about it.
Well, you give your dad you give your dad the permission, if you will, to look at it the way he looked at it, not the way you look at it.
Very good advice. Very good advice.
I knew I'd stumble upon something if I talk long enough.
She had a key line when referring to Dad's wife of 25 years, Cathy. She did the best of her ability. So this Cathy, referring to that Cathy, was saying, I'm going to give her credit for trying whatever her immaturity was, whatever her difficulty was. I'm going to give her credit for that. But this is kind of a case of a reverse what if. What ifs are mostly directed toward the future. What if this happens? What if that happens? What if I can't deal with it? Well, Cathy's looking backwards. What if that happened? What if he was ripped off? What if she didn't recognize how good he was? So she was looking backwards with her what ifs. Well, the problem with that, it's the past. She can't know that. She acknowledged in between the lines, she couldn't know the actual dynamics. It was her dad's death that made her start to second guess his happiness. If I were to say to her, and again, during the call, I mean, this is not therapy, if I were to say to her, during those 25 years, how would you assess your dad's contentment, his relationship with his wife? Oh, well, she seemed difficult to us, but he just seemed to really handle her well. Then give him credit for that. But it could have been easier for him. Well, isn't that his decision to make there? Now, obviously, it didn't sound like he was going to divorce her. But if he had dealt with her well enough to be reasonably content, then we can't project onto him, you could have had it so much better, you know that, don't you? Because that's what Cathy's doing. She's saying, I'm in doubt that my dad was truly happy. Well, you have no evidence of that. You have no evidence that he was putting up with and was miserable. She would have brought it out in this very brief call. And if we had more time to talk, I would have asked her. I would have said, is there any indication that your dad was an unhappy man, that he struggled to get along with his second wife? No. Then this is your struggle. Could we not at some level always say, it could have been better? That's a recipe for being distressed. Because in some respects, we can always find some way it could have been better. Most of the time, anyway. There are those people who are perfectly grateful and say, no, it couldn't be better. It's just as good as I want it to be. But if you search long enough, you can find ways. Gee, I wish I didn't have to put up with this with my spouse. I wish I didn't have to tolerate that with my spouse. I wish my spouse was more this way. We can all do that. Honey, if you're listening, I'm not doing that with you because I don't think I could do that with you. Just have to add a little qualifier in there. But she probably could pretty well do it with me. So I think Cathy's peace will come from the fact that her dad gave her every indication that he was living a good life. Even if Cathy and her siblings looked at this woman, their stepmom, and said, wouldn't it have been nicer if she were easier to get along with and we didn't have to be so delicate around her? Yes. Yes, in fact, it probably would have been nicer. But we don't have any reason to believe that that created distress for Dad. And the other thing to keep in mind in this, some people are just flat out better at finding peace and contentment in situations we wouldn't. They're just better at it. And it's legit. It's not faked. Thank you for joining me here on The Doctor Is In on this Look Back Friday, and a crew check for all you do there. Here at Ave. Appreciate it. Walk with God. Now that's the best walk of contentment.
For information on Dr. Ray's presentations, books, and CDs, visit drray.com and follow him on Facebook and Instagram. The Doctor Is In is a co-production of Ave Maria Radio and EWTN Radio and carried across the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.